Hello, this is Behind the Wall. I'm Stan Grant. As China's power and influence grows throughout the world, it's the tools of soft power that are often used to help push the narrative of the Communist Party onto other nations. Big budget films that tell a story of Chinese supremacy, economic engagement with countries in the Asia-Pacific region, even the Beijing Olympics in 2008, all examples of China showing us what it wants the world to hear. Jade Guan has been looking at how China conceptualises and uses soft power. She's a lecturer in strategic studies at Deakin University and the Australian War College, and she joins me now from Canberra. Jade, it's good to have you on the program. When we talk about soft power, how does China see that and express it?
Thank you, Stan, for this very interesting question and program on soft power. So for my research, I understand the Chinese understanding of soft power. First, we can use the philosophical words from Sun Tzu, who said that subduing the enemy without fighting or creating a favorable environment to your side, not to your enemies. So I think that's the traditional wisdom of Chinese to interpret soft power concept.
And when you talk about Sun Tzu, of course, he wrote The Art of War. So what you're talking about is fighting a war without having to fight a war. In recent times, what are the examples of where China has been successful in being able to use its soft power? Do we go back to the 2008 Olympics, for instance, as an example of China sending a message to the world?
Yeah, I think the 2008 Beijing Olympics is a perfect moment, at least in Chinese perspective, that it is a coming out party for the Chinese as a nation on the world stage. It not only show its gross material power, but what cultural power, what developing power China has accumulated over the past 3 decades.
Here's the thing, Jade. China has held events like the Olympics. It is a big global power. It's a big economic power. We know there are those trade relationships, but you can't compare Chinese soft power, for instance, with American soft power. The use of Hollywood, the use of music, popular culture to be able to influence the world. It doesn't have that reach, does it?
I think it's still like in the movie or popular culture side, American or the Western culture still in a dominant position. But I have noticed that China or East Asian countries have been catching up. For instance, we can see like K-pop, although that's not Chinese soft power, but that is kind of, I think, Asian popular culture as an element of soft power. And China, in these years, I have noticed like lots of dramas or films. As I think very well known is the Wolf Warrior, the Zhanlang film that actually I think was has won audience a lot, especially the Chinese audience domestically.
And that's what's really critical here, isn't it, Jade? Because while American soft power seeks to influence the world to win friends, Chinese soft power seems to be more about speaking to its own people, that it needs to convince its own people of China's strength. And you mentioned Wolf Warrior, which is a much more assertive display of Chinese power. Is China less interested in trying to influence the world with its soft power and more interested in stoking those fires of nationalism inside the country?
Yeah, this is a very great question. Actually, when I started my research on China's soft power, I only kind of examine how China conceptualized and applied its soft power in foreign relations. But then I think towards the end of the journey of my research, I actually kind of reached the conclusion at the first audience of China's soft power is more domestic it's more domestic oriented rather than internationally oriented audience.
And here's the thing, the message that the Chinese Communist Party, through its films, you mentioned the films, but through other means as well, social media, online, using things like literature and things like Xi Jinping thought, what is taught in schools. It is about this message to the Chinese people that they have been humiliated by the West, that the West seeks to dominate China. Why does the Communist Party seek to implant that message? And what is it about China that people are receptive to the idea? They're influenced by the idea of being humiliated by the West.
I think that there is a kind of a threshold between the Communist Party of China have been doing that, which is especially after the 1989 Tiananmen Square event. I think before that, China's kind of deliberately education or patriotism through a humiliation lens is less significant than its post-Tiananmen incident.
So
my understanding
is this a way, Jade, of Xi Jinping trying to deal with so many of the pressures that are inside the country, growing inequality gap, people who feel left behind, and trying to bind people to a sense of Chinese spirit or Chinese supremacy and an anger, if you like, at the West or a suspicion of the West?
Right. I think if we look at this year's situation, I think definitely at the beginning of the year, the government had so much pressure from the COVID-19 and even questioning whether it is really a good measure locking down the whole Wuhan city. And Xi Jinping himself only posted his kind of deputies to Wuhan, but not went into the city by himself. So I think there's lots of questioning there about his leadership by then, and using those I think like nationalism or nationalistic rhetoric can help to some extent to distract the pressure on this government.
It's a very common ploy used by politicians all around the world, but even more so, as you say, in China right now. Jade, it's been a pleasure to talk to you on the program. Thank you again for giving us your time.
Thank you, Stan.